You put on the consultation form, put on the website, we start recording training sessions and Zoom session. Okay. So it looks like you did some training yourself, but like you've kind of hit a plateau, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's social.
Yeah.
Okay.
She likes other people. Yeah. She's not aggressive towards other dogs or other people.
Okay.
But she hasn't had a lot of time like with other dogs.
Okay. And tell me a bit about her.
She's good. She's a good dog.
Okay.
She's really excitable and like playful, and she just has like a lot of energy. So like, she is so sweet and like, she's just very energetic. Yeah. So like, I guess she scares other people because she's so energetic, but like, she only just wants to play.
Sure.
And she will listen when she wants to. And if she's not getting her way, she's getting frustrated, or if she's not getting enough attention, then she'll start nipping us. She does this weird little thing where she kind of nibbles, and it like pinches us. Yeah. And what else? We wrote a list.
Yeah, no, lists are good.
Let's see here. Do you want to read it, or do you want us to read it?
Read it out, yeah.
Alright, so, oh yeah, she tries to run out the front door when we're trying to leave, and if we are trying to leave, then she'll start barking and get like really uncomfortable. I think that's separation anxiety.
Okay.
She jumps up on the counter. She jumps up on people when they walk inside, like her brother and her dad. And she does hate riding in the car. Yeah. It is not fun like riding over here. It's very stressful for her. And let's see. She's good in her crate, but she doesn't want to go in her crate.
Okay.
So like, getting her in there is more of a struggle than her actually being in there. When she's in there, she's really calm and everything. She bites, things like that. Only listens when she wants to, things like that. Oh, she pulls really hard when we're walking her.
Okay.
We've tried training her out of that, but that really doesn't lead anywhere, with us at least.
Sure. Have you worked with any trainers or just stuff that you've been doing?
Just stuff that we've been doing.
Okay. Like stuff on YouTube or just like, your own?
Like a whole bunch of different, like, I have like a TikTok, YouTube. Yeah, probably not the best, but.
Yeah. I mean, there's some good information, but I think it's overwhelming now because of social media. Like, everybody's a dog trainer now.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
That's pretty much all the lists that we have. We have like goals.
Yeah, what are the goals?
We want to be able to like take her places and her just like not outwardly be really excitable.
Long walks too, because walks sometimes, like if she sees a dog, she'll just sit there and stare at them until they pass. Like she won't even bark, but it's hard to like get her going if she sees another dog.
Like her attention isn't on, us or the walk. It's on everything else. And then we want to be able to like have my brother and my dad come over without her like jumping all over them, and like they try to sit down on the couch and she, is trying to like play with them and not give them like time to, just sit and relax.
Settle, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then let her.
I'll keep her just because I have the door open.
Okay.
Yeah. You can just pull her in. Well, actually, do you mind if I just put her on this?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go.
What do you have you? Leash here? Sure. So this tool here, have you ever used it to correct her?
The prong
collar?
collar? In the beginning, but now we pretty much just use it for her walks.
Okay.
And she has like a weird furry neck, so I feel like it doesn't work as well as it's supposed to.
Yeah. So prong collars are really good tools. Unfortunately, the drawback a couple of times can be if the dog is too physically tough, it doesn't do much. And like let's say if I have a reactive dog and the owner goes to correct their dog with a prong collar, if the reactivity is like too intense, they'll forego it, like they just don't care, because dogs bite each other, so their resiliency to physical discomfort is much greater than that of a human. So like, you know, you could be 6'6" and give the harshest correction, whatever, be super strong. It's gonna have a limitation at some point. And if the dog is beyond that correction, you get stuck. We deal with more fluffier, longer coated breeds, Samoyeds, Huskies, German Shepherds, you know, it gets even more difficult because then it acts as a buffer, right? So I'm assuming before reaching out, you did some research on us and how we train and everything?
Actually, my coworker, George Palacios, he recommended.
Oh, yeah, my chief.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he had nothing but good things to say, and
He's got a German
super
Shepherd
happy.
too, yeah. So I remember Chief, he was one of our first boarding trains. So we use e-collar. We use Prong. It's not that we like use it, I would say we incorporate it. So, and I find it's been a really long weekend, so if I'm like quiet, it's because I'm just tired. But we incorporate Prong collar. It's a great tool. Unfortunately, it takes a little bit too much technical skill for the average dog owner. So that's why I use remote collar. So there's three kind of primary training methods. We have food only, positive reinforcement. We have gentle leader, which is more of the positive reinforcement realm, and then we have Prong collar, and then we have e-collar. Okay, and now there's loads of other methods as well, but those tend to be the most common ones you'll come across. Positive only is great for puppies under 6 months. It's great for stuff you want to see again. You know, if you say sit and he sits, good boy, but falls short, heart rate, falls short outside because he knows more stimuli. Okay, so if her lunging at squirrels and barking at squirrels is more fun, the value of what's in your hand goes out the window. Gentle leader goes around the muzzle, has a little strand here that you clip your leash to, gives you more control because you're controlling the head. You control the head, you control the body, but not great for correcting anything. Okay, Prong collar, around the neck, gives you the biting function, but if you don't know how to correct correctly, you're not going to get very far. And I actually just had another consultation earlier when they came in with their dog on a Prong as well. And their assumption was that we put the dog on a Prong, helped a little bit, but now it's useless. I'm like, well, because the Prong is meant to do something. It's not just put it on the dog and fix the problem. You use the Prong to help fix the problem, right? So that leaves us with e-collar. So the reason why I train all my dogs over 6 months on e-collar is because right off the bat you get off leash control. Okay, all the tools fall short once you take the leash off. So if you're using food, again, if there's other things that are more valuable, it doesn't matter anymore. Prong or gentle leader are great tools when the dog is on the leash, and if you know how to use those tools correctly. But once she's off the leash, again, you're stuck. So here with the e-collar, on or off leash, I have a means of control. Okay. So are you familiar with what e-collar is?
Electric collar?
Yes. Do you know what the technology is, or what it's
not
like?
Too much.
Okay. So people tend to think e-collar is like electrocution. They think it's like sticking your finger in an outlet or something like that. It's electric, but not electricity is how I explain it. So they use the technology on humans. Have you ever been to a chiropractor or physical therapist? Have you ever had STEM? The machine that they put with the circles and it moves your muscles? No. So if you go to a chiropractor or a physical therapist, they have a machine called a TENS unit, T-E-N-S, and it's just a muscle stimulator, okay? So you might see commercials where like, oh, work out your abs while you watch TV, right? That's it, that's an e-collar, okay? So there's an electric current that does stimulate the muscles, but it's not electrocuting the dog, okay? So there's two probes on the collar that when they contact the dog's neck, and you would see the muscle twitch in that area, but the dog would feel nothing anywhere else, okay? So people, because they hear e-collar, or they think electricity, or they think the word shock, because that's what most people call it. They call it the shock collar. They're thinking, oh my God, like, that's torture. You're electrocuting your dog. I'm like, yeah, clearly you don't have an idea of what it is because it's not electricity, at least not to that sense, right? So the reason why it's, in my opinion, my go-to tool is because one, again, off-leash reliability right off the bat. Two, much easier for the owners to get reliable obedience because it doesn't require much technical skill, okay? So I've simplified training to what I know what's gonna work. And I can teach the owner and right away they see the change, they see progress, and they're motivated to go continue. Most other methods, people are constantly struggling or they're not seeing progress, so then they tend to give up. Okay, so very easy to learn. Since it's at the press of a button, it's more intuitive to us now because everything is press a button. It's a numerical dial that goes to 127 in increments of 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 127, so we can really fine tune it to the dog. So like Chief, he was, I remember meeting with him and we thought he was really overstimulated, but it turns out he was actually a pretty draggy dog. So then his number was higher up, but we also harnessed his drive using, because he loved chasing ball. So we blended training with ball in George's case, because Chief is not your average family pet dog. Okay, he needed a bit more. In most cases, it's really just discipline and obedience, and it'll fix a lot of problems. Okay, and this is something as we go along, once I see the dog and how they respond and how you're doing, it gives me a better idea of what the dog needs. Okay, so it doesn't matter about physical strength. So like, let's say I have a dog, so I had a lady, she was 90, maybe 100 pounds. She had a 150-pound Great Dane. Yes, and it was dog reactive. So, and she lived in Wicker Park, so she turned the corner, she see a dog, that would blow up. So we did Prong and e-collar because she needed more leverage, okay? Because that dog obviously was much bigger than her and much stronger than her. So the Prong was there just in case she got caught off guard. She had more physical leverage than if she were to have like just like a flat collar or something. And the e-collar, because she wasn't gonna have the physical strength, right, to kind of manhandle the dog under control, the e-collar compensated for that because she just needed to put the number up higher. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Make sense? So here, it doesn't matter how big or tall the person is or how big or tall the dog is, it's all about mental control. People tend to go for physical control. They short the leash, they restrain their dog, they're holding their dog back, right? Or they're holding their dog like this, and it's all about controlling this. Once you control this, you control everything else. And in my opinion, the e-collar is the only tool that actually allows you to do that because it's the only tool that makes the dog think they're making the decision. Okay, so if I pull a dog towards me and reel them in, I'm doing all the work, right? So let's say the dog doesn't want to come to me. I can make him come to me, but the dog didn't do it, right? But if I have him on the e-collar and I give him a little bit of pressure and I'm using the collar and I'm going up and eventually the dog goes, hey, trying to not go to Jesse or resist going to him is causing this thing to go up. What happens if I go to Jesse? It disappears. So the dog goes, oh, so if I go to you, this goes away faster. So it tricks the dog into thinking they're making the decision when it's really us manipulating them into making decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's what actually creates the reliability of it because they think they're making the decision there. And they're learning, oh, if I do this, pressure goes away. So pressure is normal. It's all over the place. Growing up, you know, we had peer pressure. You guys drive. Have you ever been on the expressway and like someone's really close to your bumper and it makes you feel uncomfortable, right? And you might, yeah, you might switch lanes, you might speed up, you might not do anything, or you might hit the brakes, right? They're putting pressure on you, telling you like, do something, right? And whether you respond in the way they want is one thing, but that it makes you feel uncomfortable, which then motivates the behavior, right? So e-collar is another form of pressure. It's electric pressure. Right now, I'm using leash pressure to keep her as calm as I can. Right. So earlier, she settled for a bit because at first she was like super stimulated, and then I let her be to see if she would just relax, and then she kind of got up and started moving around. And your response was kind of just let the leash go, right? But that's part of the reason why she has issues, right? Is because she's getting free rein, and no one's kind of dialing her down and telling her like just chill. Right? So here, as soon as I took her, that's all I did was put a few rules on her and say like, relax. We're in a quiet room. There's nothing going on here. There's no reason for you to be that stimulated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this here is more advanced. This is not stuff you need to learn, but this is to show you just how easy it really is. Is people tend to teach their dogs what to do when really the dogs need to learn what not to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Right, and it's super common. The dog's like, you know, the owner's like, the dog jumps on everybody, and the dog like barks at everything, and the dog's pulling everywhere and stuff, right? I'm like, but if you say, you should go, don't jump, and you correct them for jumping, and you correct them for barking, and you correct them for whining, and you correct them for nibbling at you and all that stuff, the dog goes, okay, well, if I can't do these things, I guess I'll just relax. And then we get calm energy. So it's kind of like kids. If you don't tell kids what not to do, they're going to just do whatever. They're going to draw on the walls, or they yell, and run around, right? And do make a lot of noise. But when you start to say, like, you can't do those things, then they sit there and they play quietly. You see?
Yeah.
So we do cover both of these things in the training. I will teach you, of course, how to do obedience training, because you do have to have a means of control. But at the same time, it's also teaching you how to differentiate between when would you be using obedience versus when would you be doing behavior. Okay? Questions so far?
Just so much information.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple, and with the training, so part of the reason why we record everything now is in response to COVID, is I was showing people like, hey, we're still operating, but also I don't touch the dogs anymore. I coach my clients, so I'm here with you, we're training together, but you're doing all of it, okay? So it's so much information that people will forget stuff, and I go, just go on YouTube and pull up your video, and you just watch your video and go, what did Jesse say that one part? Or then when I work with couples too, it's really helpful, because they always argue. They'll say that I said one thing and the other person, no, he said this. I'm like, just watch your video, that'll solve the problem right there, okay? So you also have a reference point. It's nice now because, like, let's say you're struggling with something and I have another client that had the same problem and we fixed it. I can just send you the video and say, hey, go to 20 minutes in and watch that part, and it's the same problem that you're dealing with. Okay, now you have a visual of what it is you're trying to do. So with this stuff, it's pretty straightforward. The biggest issue or the biggest problem we have is people feel bad about the tool because they think they're hurting their dog. It's like the most common thing that I get. But dogs, one, again, are physical animals. So like, let's say she did something, like her behavior was unacceptable to a dog. What do you think that dog would do to correct her? Bite her. Yeah, right? Cut it out. That's how they raise their puppies. That's how they correct each other and all that stuff. So here, the e-collar, think of it as a bite in the butt. Okay? And you can make it a very light bite, or you can make it a very powerful bite, depending on what she's doing and when you want her to stop and all that stuff, right? So it's not going to make your dog not like you. It's not going to screw her up psychologically or emotionally or whatever. When we teach it to her and she understands it's not a communication, it's going to just improve that relationship even more. Okay? So the first thing that we teach in almost every case, especially with a case like this, is how to walk correctly on a leash. Okay? Leash pulling is like one of the most common things that people want to fix. Also, when you put a remote on the dog and you just press the button and they feel the contraction, in most cases they want to run away from it. Okay? They want to move away from the collar. So we use a moving command, which is the heel, to teach her how it turns on and how it turns off. Okay, so she gets the movement that she's needing in response to the collar, but you're also teaching her how it turns on and how it turns off. Okay, because she's not meant to have her muscles contracted, right? That's human technology. So we have to teach her what it is and how to recognize it, and then we start shaping everything from that. Okay, now leash walking tends to fix 60 to 70% of problems. So that's also why it's the first thing that I teach, because it fixes most issues. And then after we cover the heel, so that's class 1, is the first step of heel. We come back class 2, you let me know of any improvements. You might say, hey Jesse, she's so much calmer in the house. She's much calmer on the walks and all that stuff. She's much easier to walk. We can walk her for like an hour and she's no problem. I go, great, it's a lot of progress. We work on the second half of heel. We make any adjustments that we may need to with the power and all that stuff. And then you come back class 3, okay? Then on class 3, same thing, review. How was it for this week? Good. Or maybe we're struggling with this one concept. What is it? And then I help you get the answer for addressing whatever that issue is. And then class 3 can be anything from like dealing with behavior stuff to like jumping to recall. Okay? So I try to tackle recall and the heel right off the bat. Because heel, of course, everybody wants to stop leash pulling, and it's also just the foundational command that we want to teach in response to the collar. And then recall, super important, because every dog needs to know how to come and call just in case they happen to get off leash, okay? And this allows you to take her, she goes to dog parks to play with dogs, and be able to have off leash freedom and not worrying about like, is she gonna run away? Or can I get my dog back, okay? So, cost and length of time is just determined by how much control do you want over your dog, okay? Questions so far?
So for our goals then, for, being able to take her out and have longer walks and for her to be better around people and other dogs, what do you recommend then for like
the program? So you're in the 6, 9, or 12 class range. Think of 6 as we walk our dog, go to the dog park. 9, walk our dog, go to the dog park, go to restaurants. 12, all that stuff, plus we go hiking, we go to the dog beach, we go to the park,
That's what I know.
Okay, so that's the full, that's everything. Okay, now the stuff like the behavior stuff, your brother, your dad, or whatever, coming over, we would cover that in any of those programs too. Okay, the behavior stuff is actually fairly simple. Okay, because it's just don't do that. It's the teaching her what to do that's more difficult. Okay, that requires more time. Because she's not meant to sit, stay, or down, whatever. That's not in her genetic code. Okay. She's meant to be out hunting and like looking for squirrels and mating and procreating and making puppies and all that stuff. So here, with the, just get it back under control. There's a little resistance. So there's 6 foundational obedience commands: sit, stay, down, come, place, heel. If you did 12, we cover all 6 of those commands and we build them to off-leash reliability. So you get a little frustrated. The only command that needs to be off-leash reliable is the recall. Because if she gets off-leash and you call her and she doesn't return, you have a problem, right? Everything else is just superficial, okay? So if you did 6 classes, we cover heel and recall for sure. We'll cover the behavior stuff, and we'll probably have a class or 2 left over. We could cover, stationary command or something like that. The 9-week, we just cover more commands, and then 12-week we cover the 6 commands, plus we build them, like I said, up to off-leash reliability. Now, I can only take you as far as you're willing to go, and the more you want to teach her, the more work you're going to have. Okay, so if you do 12, the first 6 classes or so, we teach all the commands on the short leash, and then the second 6 classes we spend building them to a higher level of reliability. Okay, typically by that 9th class, you'll have all the information, and then it's time to practice. So usually around the 9th class, I'll tell people, and it's optional, I'll tell them, take this time to go practice for like 3 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks, and then schedule your 10th class. And then you come back with like, this is where we're having problems. We fix it, okay? Or I show you how to fix it. Take another 2 to 3 weeks to practice and have your 11th class, right? Because at that point, it's all about time. Us here, because we're professional trainers and stuff, we can train a dog to be off-leash reliable very quickly because we already know everything. You have to make mistakes. You have to learn where you're having problems. You have to learn where you're having issues understanding the concept, right? So that's why I recommend that people put more of a gap towards the end. And I get also other clients that just do the straight 12 all the way through, and then they just practice until they get to the point where they need to be, okay? So don't think at the end of 12 she would be fully off-leash trained, because you also think about how much time you're putting into it, right? Because that's going to require you to go to the park. It's going to require you to have distractions and squirrels and all that stuff, things to work with in order to make the obedience reliable no matter what the context is. If you only practice at the same park and it's a quiet park or whatever with a few distractions, she's going to be great there. But then when you take her to a more distracting park, you're going to have problems. Okay, so that's why exposure is also a big part of the routine as well. Because the more you expose her to, she's learning like, oh, okay, come means come no matter what I'm chasing, whether it's a squirrel, a rabbit, a goose, a dog, or whatever, a ball, I have to return, and also the environment doesn't matter. Okay, make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Questions?
So then are the classes like once a week? How long are they usually?
Once a week for an hour.
Okay.
Typically, if you have a consistent schedule, Maria would schedule that with you, and she'd pick a time that works well for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's say Sundays at 4 was open. Every Sunday at 4 for 6 weeks or whatever would be your time. So if you did 6, for example, you get the 4 o'clock time on Sunday plus 1. So we give you 7 weeks in case you get sick or you have to cancel or something like that. We give you 7 weeks of priority. Now, if you cancel or reschedule or you have to go out of town for a few weeks, whatever, you use up that priority time. So like, let's say you have to postpone twice. By the time you hit the 7th week, you have like a class or 2 left. You don't lose the classes, but you may lose the time, okay? Because weekends and evenings are my busiest. So to keep my calendar rolling, we give people priority, and then once they use up the priority, we'll just tell them, like, okay, we need someone else to book, but we have these other spots available, and then we just fill in your classes wherever we can fit you in on the calendar, okay? Other questions?
So the difference between like behavioral and obedience, could you explain that a little more?
So behavior is simple. Jesus, I need coffee. Behavior is simple. It's simply don't do that, right? So then you would just think of all the things you want her to stop doing, and then you would correct her, right? So like for me, so think of obedience as education, and think of behavior as morality. Obedience, sit, stay, come. Education, math, English, science. Behavior, don't jump, don't bark, don't bite. Morality, don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, right? So someone can be a genius, but be a bad person, and someone may not be the smartest person, but be a very good person. They don't overlap, right? Same thing with dogs. I get dogs that know all these fancy tricks, but lunge and bark at dogs on the walk, right? So that's behavior. So here, like what I'm doing here, this is behavior, okay? Because she's wanting to move, she's so used to just doing whatever she wants. She was able to settle for a bit, but since she's so used to doing whatever, she's like, okay, like I can move, I want to move now, like even this year, right? So when you see me doing like the little leash pops, I'm telling her you can't do that, but it has to go somewhere, and that's why we get this whining, okay? Since she doesn't have the physical outlet or the movement to express it, she's trying to express it in another way, and this is normal. So the more you counter her, right? So like let's say you started training, you start putting rules. In the beginning, you see like, she'll be calm, and then she'll like try to get worked up, and then you calm her down, and it's like back and forth, and eventually you start to get bigger periods of time where she's calm and then she'll spike, and then you'll tell her no or whatever. She calms back down again, and then after a couple of weeks, you're like, oh yeah, she's real calm at the house now because we don't allow her to do anything we don't want her to do. Okay, and you're not being mean. Okay, one of the most common issues I get with dogs is overstimulation. And overstimulation is the lack of boundaries. It's no one telling them no and telling them what they can't do. So like the world is limitless. So that's why they're just constantly moving around and like barking and stuff, because it's just overloaded with stimulation, and they get frustrated and they don't know what to do. Okay, so we have to put rules to them, otherwise they get lost. Other questions?
So then, for her training, sorry, I feel like my questions are all over the place, but for the training then, you require the e-collar for training. Is there any other things that we need, like, to have at home for her training?
No, the leash is fine there. You'll need to get a long 30-foot leash. They run like $8 to $12. You know, on Amazon, nothing fancy. The collar itself, how much does she weigh?
She weighs almost 60 pounds.
60, almost 60.
Yeah.
Sure. So you technically have two choices. One collar runs about 287-ish. The other one runs about 325-ish with tax. You get them on Amazon. One is meant for 70 pounds and under. The other is meant for 70 pounds and over. Okay. Now the reason why I mentioned the 70 pound and over one is I do always tell people you want to account for her fur, and it can inhibit contact. So having more power just gives you more. It's easier for you to achieve contact. Okay. Plus, you want to think like in an emergency situation, like let's say she's running off because she's scared of like a firework or something. You have to then override the fear. Okay, and then we need power to override that. And I've had dogs that have gotten so like spooked of something that they'll just completely bypass the collar, and the owner will be maxed out, and it's because they got a lower power collar. Okay, so you want to account for the fact that she's got a denser coat of fur, and then in case there's an emergency and she's running off or something like that, I don't want to have to worry about. And plus the size of her, right, she's almost 60 pounds, is you want to account for all that stuff in those moments. Okay. In those moments, right there. Okay.
She gets like this when we try to leave sometimes, like she starts kind of cowering, she goes in front of the door, and then it's very frustrating for us too, because like we're just trying to go to work or something.
Sure. And right there, I don't know if you saw where she like went like that. That was a flight response. Okay, so when we see flight response, which is normal, we have fight, flight, avoidance, submission when we're dealing with stress, is when people do obedience, they always think of it as like when everything's perfect. But life is not going to be perfect. And that's actually what I tell people to train for. Is if you can control your dog in a situation where shit has hit the fan, I'm not worried about life because that's going to be easier. You know, she's playing with her dog friends or whatever, she's off leash running around the park, and it's just a nice day, that's all fine. But if you know how to work with your dog even when they're under stress or in panic or flight mode, that's the hardest. Everything else is easy peasy. Okay? Other questions?
So how soon after the consultation do your clients typically start their training?
Depends on their availability. I had people that I saw in January that are just barely starting right now, but they wanted the evenings and like weekends type stuff. We're able to figure all that out with you. So like if you have availability, like let's say 12 o'clock on a Friday or something, like everybody, well not everybody, but most people are 9 to 5 now that COVID is over or whatever. So my busiest schedule is evenings and weekends. So people who have availability during the day are much easier to get in because no one's really taking up those times currently. Okay. Otherwise, it could be a couple of weeks before we get you in, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, because so in the wintertime, we've been training here at my facility. Like 99% of my clientele is here. I got like 2 clients that still meet outside. And then during the spring, summer, and fall time, as long as the weather is nice, we train at Oz Park. Have you guys been to Oz Park? It's over in Lincoln Park. It's crazy busy. Like you got people, you got dogs, you got baseball games going on, tennis games, people riding their bikes, strollers, rollerbladers, off-leash dogs running around. It's crazy busy. So it's nice for people because we're training in a distracting environment and they're getting to learn how everything works in that environment. Now, we also have the clients that come here, so then the concern is like, well, how is it going to apply from here to home? So with the e-collar, let's say we're working with her and her number is like 25 out of 127 here, okay? Which is not as distracting environment. And then you go to your neighborhood, which is more distracting. Well, to override the neighborhood just means higher number. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So you just have to make it important to her within that context. And then we can achieve that through power. So it's really common sense once you get used to it, and you're like, oh yeah, like, you know, when we see dogs, we're number 65, when we're in a non-distracting environment, it's 35, when we're at the park, it's 50. You'll just start to know all these ranges, and then you just kind of start going there like automatically without even thinking about it. Okay? Other questions?
Is there anything else that like you should know before going into training?
One of the most common questions I get asked is when does the e-collar go away? In my book, when you need it, it doesn't. So inside the house, she's a great dog, you don't need it. But when you're outside walking her, you gotta account for there's gonna be a lot more things going on, a lot more stimuli. Also, in case if there's an emergency, I wanna know that I have a means of control. The other reason is opportunistic behavior. Are you guys familiar with that? You drive, you go on the expressway, you go to the speed limit.
Sometimes okay.
So most people don't go to speed limit, right? That's opportunistic behavior. But if you see a squad car, what happens?
You go straight to the speed limit.
Exactly, because now there's sort of consequence, okay? All animals do it. It's a part of survival instinct. So if there's like a pond of water with an alligator in it, and the animals know the alligator's there, they won't touch the water. They see the alligator leave, everybody comes in, everybody drinks. The alligator comes back, they go away, right? Because they're seizing an opportunity. So same thing for dogs. Think of that e-collar as a cop on a collar. When it's present, she's going to be much more compliant, well-behaved, and obedient. When it's not on, she's going to push things a bit more, okay? Has nothing to do with my skills as a trainer, has nothing to do with the methods. It's simply just opportunistic behavior, okay? Humans, we know better. We know not to go past 70 on the expressway, but people still go past 70 on the expressway when they know they can get away with it, right? So that's nothing to do with intelligence, it's simply just instinct. So for people, same thing with the dog, right? Cop on a collar, when it's present, the dog's gonna behave themselves. When it's not present, they're gonna push things a bit more. But the pattern is almost always in the house, the dog is fine. Outside is when they need it. You're gonna go to the restaurant, you have it on. You're gonna go hiking, you have it on. You're gonna go play with dogs, you can have it on. When guests come over, maybe the first 15 minutes you put it on, so you can control her, keep her nice and calm. And then after she settles down, you take it off. You don't need it anymore, okay? One day I was walking my dogs through Logan Square here on the boulevard, and I got to like California. My pit hates fireworks. She wants to just take off. And I wasn't gonna take him off leash, she was walking him on the leash and stuff, and somebody blew up a firework. And my pit started to panic, and like pull and like get really anxious. And I was like super pissed off, because I was like, well, if I had my e-collar, like I could have just calmed me down. But because I didn't have it, I had to deal with her walking 2 miles back in an anxious state, okay? So again, I wasn't planning on somebody blowing up a firework on October or August, but it happened. So it's also just those moments of like, if something happens, maybe you get charged by an off-leash dog. I had a client at Alice Park, her dog and another dog went after a tennis ball at the same time, got into a dog fight. But within like half a second, she was able to pull her dog out because of e-collar. I've had clients' dogs take off after fireworks, they come back because of e-collar. I had another dog, they were walking through Lincoln Park, and when they turned around, their dog was face to face with a coyote. They were able to get the dog back, e-collar. You know, so stuff happens. Like, is it all the time? No, but no one's psychic. Like, you're not gonna know when it's gonna happen. So I like knowing if something does, I have a means of getting control back. Okay. Other questions?
So then for the e-collar and her being off leash, we're gonna be able to like take her to the park and she'll be able to come back, hopefully, like things like that. I'm sorry, I'm tired also.
Yes, if you do your homework.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Okay.
it's a lot of us learning how to train her.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple and it's effective. So like, if you want to have an example, just go to my YouTube channel. Lesson ones are always great to watch because no one knows what they're doing but me, right? And you can see like an out of control dog, and then by the end of the class you're like, oh crap, like that dog's walking so nice. And if you go to older videos, like during the summertime of 2020, you'll see us at Alice Park, and you'll see the dogs learning how to walk nicely on a leash in the middle of Alice Park with all this crap going on, okay? It's pretty straightforward. It just requires you to, you know, I call myself the lazy man's dog trainer because you just train as you go about your life. But if you're wanting to have more control, it's going to require you to do more. Okay, if you're looking for simple stuff, it's easy because you can just train as you live your life. But if you're wanting more advanced off-leash control, it requires you to go to the park, have her on the long leash, do your training and your practice, and keep doing that until eventually you get her there. Okay. Again, the most common issue that people have is they don't want to go high enough on the collars. So like, let's say she happens to be very tough to the e-collar, and I tell you like, she needs 85 to be compliant, and you're like, you come back and I'm like, how was it? And you're like, terrible. I'm like, well, how high did you go? 45. Like 45, not 85. So you're not going to get there. Does that make sense? And that's an extreme, but that's just to prepare you for like, okay, well, if you're not willing to go there, then there's no real point in doing it, because you're going to always end up arguing with the dog, and it should never be an argument. Okay. Other questions?
So then for the training, is it more one-on-one or is it with other?
No, it's just us. It'd just be the three of us, unless there's like another person who's going to be a handler, working with the dog and stuff. And then so what I do is, first class, just so you know, on the first class, the first person to work with her is going to do all the work. Okay? So when I work with couples or whatever, brothers, family, sisters, all that stuff, the first person, because the dog doesn't know what's going on, is doing all the work, and by the time they pass it off to the other person, it's all been done. And the dog just transfers right away. So I actually worked with two sisters yesterday, because you got two sisters, right? I worked with two sisters yesterday, and then the first one went, and then the second one did it, and it was like, she barely had to do anything, okay? So it's just how it is, but that's how effective the method is. Like it's so simple that, like, let's say you did the training, and then your brother's like, oh wow, like, I want to walk that, and you show him, just transfers. Okay, he just has to do the same things that you are. So if your brother, let's say the number's 45, and your brother goes like, I feel bad, I don't want to zap her at 45, and he only goes to 25, she's not going to listen to him. But as soon as you go to 25, all of a sudden, she listens. Okay? So
our brother, he does does walk our dog a lot while like we're at work. We both work at Chase, so we have the same hours. And would you recommend him coming to the first class then if he's gonna be like when we're at work sometimes he walks there?
Sure. You know, I have to divide the time up. Just be aware of that. You know. So you can do one of a couple things. He can be there to like who would be the primary handler? The two of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's welcome to join, and then I could focus on you guys, and at the very end give him a quick rundown. Or he can always come in later on when like a lot of training's been done, because all the work's there, and you're just kind of catching him up. You can also refer to the videos as well, and watch them there to kind of catch up on anything he's missed. But trying to split up an hour amongst 3 people, someone's going to get cut short. So
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, I have no problem with him coming and watching or whatever. Or if you want to swap who does what, you know, you're all there, but maybe one class, one of you is doing something, the other class, you just kind of take turns, you know, however you okay? Other questions?
I think you answered the question that I had with like our brother being there, and you know, maybe he like observes or you know, but he's gonna be handling her sometimes too.
Sure. Anything else?
I think they'll come as we start more.
I'm so bad at thinking of questions on the spot.
No, that's fine. I mean, we've covered, you know, all the most common ones, when does it go away, what it is, you know, the programs, how long the classes are and all that stuff. It's all pretty standard stuff. I do have a question for you, which is, what's going on with her ears here?
Because she has like dry skin because
What do you feed her?
Royal Canin.
Any particular reason? Is it the German Shepherd one?
Yeah.
Okay. Royal Canin is garbage. Okay. What I would do is if you go to Kreiser's, any food in Kreiser's is really good. But Earthborn Holistic, Signature, and or Taste of the Wild are all really good brands.
Just gonna get this on my phone.
Yeah.
Well, I can send you the video, but you're going that way tomorrow anyway.
Yeah, I can tell you again.
I'm
No
gonna be right
problem.
next to Kaiser, so I can stop by there.
Gotcha. Excellent. So it's Signature. It's like Signature but with a Z. Earthborn Holistic or Taste of the Wild.
Signature Earthborn Holistic Taste of the Wild.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, when you go to Kreiser's, there's better brands, but they tend to be too rich for the average family pet. Okay, those brands I used to feed them to my dogs. I'd probably go for some kind of fish. What's the protein of your Royal Canin? Is it like chicken or something?
I believe so. I haven't looked at the bag in a while, but.
Okay, take a look at the bag. If you flip it over the ingredients, it's probably some kind of chicken. Dogs tend to have allergies to chicken too. So the reason why I ask is when you switch the brand of food, are you going to keep similar protein? So like some kind of poultry, whatever. Has she been on it for a really long time?
Yeah, since she
A
got
puppy?
her. Yeah.
How long have you had her for?
We got her 7 weeks, yeah.
7 weeks, okay. So, do you know how to transition foods?
No, but I've heard that you kind of like slowly transition it over.
Correct. So what I would do is 1/3 of the new food to 2/3 of the old food for 2 days. And then half and half for 2 days. Then 1/3 old food to 2/3 new food. And then after 2 days, all new food. If you notice, like when you transition her, she gets loose stool or diarrhea for a day or two, that's fine. It should start to get better. Okay, so usually by the 2nd or 3rd day, you should start seeing it getting better. If it's like explosive or it's like, man, this is terrible, like what in the world is this? Then she probably can't handle the protein. Okay, you can go back to Kreiser's and then let them know like, hey, we bought this bag of food. Our dog didn't take to it. She's having really bad diarrhea, and I believe they just swap it out for a different type of protein. Okay, and you can talk to them, and usually they're pretty good with helping people transition. I would just be mindful of like, again, the super, like it's like a Kana, I think Instinct, from, like those foods tend to be too rich. Okay, and they also dehydrate dogs. they're really good foods, but it's just, there's more stuff. Those three that I mentioned to you are good brands of food that shouldn't cause any issues, okay? But that may help with this here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it started around like when the winter started, so we kind of just figured it's from the cold weather. And her 1 year is coming up, so we were going to take her and ask that question at the vet.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can ask them there as well. So, I mean, it really shouldn't be because of the cold. We almost always go to diet whenever we see stuff like that. But then, you know, the vet can do tests and stuff, which that's not my specialty.
Okay.
Anything else? Oh, and if your vet says like, oh, put him on a Royal Canine or Science Diet or something, your vet's a dumbass. Those foods are garbage, okay? Veterinarians are backed by a lot of these like Purina and stuff like that, so that's why they push it. But also veterinarians only get like a single class on diet, and they learn about like proteins, but not like the makeup of protein. Like it gets complicated. So unless they're a dietary veterinary, a dietitian, whatever, chances are they don't know much about diet. Okay, and I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've had people say, "Oh, but my vet said get the dog pedigree." I'm like, "Well, you need to get a new vet because pedigree is like one of the worst foods to give your dog." Royal Canine is better than pedigree, but there's foods now that are so much better that are almost like within the same price range too. So,
Yeah,
okay.
that's really good.
Yeah, that is good. 'Cause
We were even thinking about like switching her food over.
we were.
We were because we were maybe she can.
Yeah, those foods are expensive considering that the quality is not that great. So, okay. Anything else?
Do you have any recommendations on keeping her a little bit handled on the way home?
Keeping her what?
A little bit handled on the way home.
I mean, you have, it looks like your prong is fitted correctly.
I have treats with me too that I've been trying to give her, but she's not interested in the treats when she's like this.
Yeah, so she's either too stressed or too stimulated. Yeah. Oh, because of the car ride home, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how to correct her with the prong collar?
It's just a tight bite.
Correct. So here, let me go ahead and have you switch her to your prong there.
Would you recommend like one of us in the back with her or like?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you something real quick, okay? And I'll take the leash here again. So I'm going to correct it with the prong collar, okay? She's probably going to get. Let me take this off real quick. So whenever you correct with the prong, it's to stop something, okay? So here, so see how she's squirming?
Yeah.
This squirming is kind of submissive, right? Like she really just plopped on the ground. And that correction was stop what it is that you're doing. Okay, so if you're in the car, one would be in the back. And then, you know, when you do a correction, you don't want to do tight to tight. So what I did was I gave in slack, and that gives me momentum to do a quick pop.
And it's gonna be like a bite.
Yes, right, because when you yank it, it does this. So that's why it has to be real quick. What people tend to do is they keep it tight, they go tighter, and then they keep it tight again. So it just stays like this. The bite is supposed to do this. So you have to go from relaxed to close to relaxed, but very quickly, much like a dog bite, okay? So if you're in the car, and the moment you hear her start to like escalate, boom, that's when you would start it. We wouldn't wait minutes in or like try to soothe her first and then go, okay, now I'm gonna stop you. You wanna stop it at the very beginning. Otherwise, she's gonna escalate always to that degree before she stops, okay? And on a scale of 1 to 10 on that second one, because the one that she yipped, that was probably like a 4 to like a 6, okay? Just to give you an idea. If you correct her and she gets louder, technically you would correct firmer. And then, but if you feel like we're not getting anywhere, then I just leave it alone. Okay, I give myself a 3 correction rule. If I don't change the behavior within 3 corrections, I stop. Okay, and then I wait a little bit and then come back to it and try again, because then it just builds frustration and then things just go downhill, okay?
Okay.
But you should see an immediate shift once you apply an appropriate correction, okay?
Okay.
Anything else?
Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything else. It's just getting, scheduling it with her, yeah.
Correct, so she'll follow up with you.